welcome again. This is our last session for Indieway. So Wings Interactive Director of Communications, Corina Diaz, will be here soon. She will talk about how Wings Interactive finds and select games to invest in and the benefits of having women and gender diverse leads on your team. So I'm inviting her to join us right now. Hello, Corina. Welcome.
Hello. Testing, everyone can hear?
Yep, we can hear you clearly. You can start
Wonderful.
whenever you want.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's, I guess there's people from all over the world here, but it's nice and early where I am, and it's just wonderful to be joining Indieway this month. I'm Corina Newby / Diaz, depending on where you find me online. I've recently changed my name. I'm the communications director at Wings Interactive. And I'm joining you today to, I think, give everyone a little bit of a better idea of what Wings is, why we exist, what we do, and how we are trying to contribute to just a more positive future for the industry. We're very interested, obviously, in making sure that gender representation and diversity is at the forefront of games moving forward. And depending on how long you've been in game development, a little bit of background on myself, I joined the games industry around 2015. So certainly more recent than many others, but I have seen some of the news cycles that the games industry has gone through when it comes to women working in games, different sort of gender diversity and sort of non-binary people working in games. And I think the industry has really taken some aggressive steps forward in the short time that I've been part of it to try and improve the situation for everyone, not just for those who are sort of represented by organizations like Wings, but for everybody, including, you know, your cis male entities and everyone else who makes games. I think diversity really does a lot to not only strengthen the offering that you can sort of find in the market. Obviously, we all want to play different kinds of games and see, you know, games that maybe break the mold or break the barriers of what we're used to. However, also from a commercial standpoint, and this is much more my background, I come from a marketing side of games. Commercially, games that are created by women and gender diverse teams, and specifically games that are, as I said, sort of outside of the norm. So they might be presenting new ideas or just new storytelling formats that we're not typically used to. They can bode very commercially strongly in the industry. So I think it's important to sort of get that off my chest a little bit. I'm someone who came into games as a player and a consumer, and seeing the diversity of games change and grow over the past 5 to 6 years, and certainly seeing that path continue in the future is very personally important to me, but I think also incredibly important for the viability of the marketplace. There's simply more gamers than we realized in the world, and many of those gamers are looking for things that reflect their own experiences, their own lives, and of course, you know, that comes with diversity as well. I will say also that Wings is founded by European people, so we have quite a few people in Europe on the team. However, we also we have people from all over the world, and we're trying very hard to reach more people from different regions that aren't typically represented in the games industry. So it is pretty exciting to be speaking to the Indieway team today. I know Turkey has a really vibrant games industry. There's a lot going on in different parts of the world right now where governments are getting involved in funding games, and Wings, being an investment interest, is just looking to complement some of what we already see happening in a really great way. So yeah, getting involved with people outside of Europe. I'm from North America. We have people from, obviously all over Asia, Australia. There's different parts of the Middle East. We really are trying to create a more global games industry. So long story short, when I do talk about diversity and inclusion, although Wings focuses on women developers and gender diverse led teams, we do also sort of have this other caveat where we really want to represent areas of the world where we're not typically used to seeing, major commercial success come from. And part of why we feel that is that those games are underfunded and maybe underrepresented. So we want to make that change. I guess the history of Wings is kind of interesting if people watching are not familiar, and if you are, it's still kind of interesting. Wings was born out of arguably the COVID crisis. So last year, GDC, which is the Game Developers Conference in North America, a pretty large industry event, was forced to cancel. And many developers were affected by this, not only women and gender diverse teams, everybody in the industry was affected, especially indies who tend to invest a lot of money and finances into making sure that those 1 or 2 maybe pillar events that they attend every year are extremely meaningful and impactful. The reason that we exist is because people saw us as both a solution to a very strong need in the industry. People needed money and were stuck. But also we have a team that is very good at sort of finding teams and identifying those who may be in need and maybe don't know where to find those funding sources. So Wings has gone on to create an investment fund, and that's really where we're focused now, that is designed to elevate and uplift women and gender diverse teams. And very specifically, we're looking at teams that are led by women and gender diverse people. And a lot of times we're asked, why that focus? There's obviously some statistical reasons for that. And I do have a couple reference points here, but there's more and more gamers who are women. There's more and more gamers who do not identify as sort of cis male players. And that diversity is underrepresented for sure in video games. But when it comes to the creators as well, the stories themselves don't necessarily have to revolve around women and gender diverse people for us to look at the games. The games can be commercially viable in many different ways beyond just the character representation. However, we are looking for people who, are leading their own projects or are trying to put their own voice out there. So we do meet a lot of teams that have women or have gender diverse representation, but they're maybe in junior roles, or the team has just started adding them to the mix. And we're definitely interested in trying to find people who are leading the charge, and again, trying to have their own voice told through the story. So we do look for some of those leadership roles. And they don't exist. There's not that many teams that have women and gender diverse people in lead roles. Certainly in AAA, they've identified this need. I think a long time ago they identified this need. But indie is I think well aware of this and maybe better represented, but underconnected when it comes to funding sources. So that's where Wing steps in. And we're absolutely interested in indie teams. Even if the pitch or the game isn't quite perfect, we're absolutely open to looking at it and maybe even giving feedback to help the team get a little further. So part of it is going to be us providing more opportunities to those teams. That's the only way we'll create change in the industry. And, in a very real way, that means putting dollars behind those people. We don't see it as necessarily a risk. I'll go through our pitch process very quickly afterwards. But, there is sort of a vetting process for any team that comes to Wings. We have a great advisory board, as I mentioned, of people who are just, tons of credentials in the industry in terms of their experience. They've shipped many titles, very commercially successful. So they're able to take a critical eye to some of the applicants. And certainly in addition to considering the team makeup and the representation on the team, we're looking at funding on a project by project basis, which is also a little bit different from some diversity initiatives. We want to help you make the game, not necessarily to establish the studio or create the team. We're sort of supporting something that already exists and helping it to get to market. There's only about 20 to 22% of game creators that identify as sort of female or women or gender diverse in some way, which is, obviously we'd like to see that closer to 50-50. But I think the more stark number that I like to pull out, because as we know, the industry has changed rapidly over the last little while, and I have a feeling more women and gender diverse devs will be coming up quite rapidly. But we're still only seeing a very small amount of funding go to those people. And there's plenty of places where you can get funding for your game. Some people choose to work with publishers, some people get grants and government assistance, and there's sort of other strict funding sources that give you money, more like Wings as an investor. But only about 1% of the total funds going to games from venture capitalists are actually reaching women and gender diverse teams, which is not even comparable to the number that are in the industry. So that's really, again, why Wings exists. Our history may have been helping like sort of everyone and making sure that those in need were addressed. And now we've turned our focus to really elevating marginalized voices in the industry and more specifically putting money behind their projects so that we all get to see them and they sort of hit the market at a strong point where they have chance of commercial success and, therefore can also be representative for others in the industry. If we have a couple games that are wildly successful, created by women and gender diverse teams, we will probably inspire more people of those nature to make games and to get into the industry. So that's a huge part of what Wings does as well. I would like to make sure that it's very clear, how to access funds from Wings. Given that, we've had some major news recently. As you may have seen, Riot Games has joined forces with Wings in a sense and has given us $1 million to contribute towards investing in games. And we invest up to $500,000 per project. So, that is a meaningful contribution. We do have a number of other generous sponsors who are going to be joining us in sort of similar fashion. So if you know other companies as well who are looking to fund diversity initiatives and really put their money where their mouth is, but also give money to a team that knows how to get it to the right projects, that's what Wings does. So we've recently partnered with Riot, and we have an Elevate program that I'll touch on a little bit at the end. But the whole idea is for us to be able to fund more projects. So currently we have 8 funded projects at Wings. There are more coming, and I can't talk too much about them just yet. You're welcome to go check them out on our website, wingsfund.me. But the way that we ask games to pitch is perhaps a little bit different from other funding sources. So most funding sources, it is a bit of a one shot. And I won't lie, we do want to see pitches that are at a certain degree of quality and completion. And, as I said, they have to fit criteria that Wings has set out in terms of having leads on the team that are women or gender diverse representation. But beyond that, we really encourage people to apply, even if their pitch has certain elements missing. And we actually have a great blog that you can check on our website that has sort of some of the pitching basics. It links to a couple fantastic templates from the Game Discover company. There's basically a lot of ways to save yourself time when you're pitching just by looking at what other people have done. So we've put together some of those resources for our teams. But ultimately, the pitches that we tend to get are maybe not the easiest games to present. I certainly am constantly surprised by the diversity of games that are getting pitched to us. And some of them are difficult to communicate. Some of them are something that I don't think has been done before, at least not with a commercial success point that they can look to. So if there's no example of what you've done before, the pitch is obviously a little trickier, but it tends to be more interesting. So when pitching to Wings, you can come sort of with a complete pitch or an incomplete pitch. Our team will assess pretty much everything evenly, but any pitch that has enough information and, sort of detail about how they want to go forward with the funding, those are the ones that obviously our team is able to give a little bit more feedback on. And if they're incomplete, or if for some reason Wings feels that there's a lot of promise in the game, we actually come back to those who have pitched to us and make recommendations. And those are coming directly from our advisory board. So it can be very valuable for a team to pitch to Wings, even if you're unsuccessful in receiving the funding. I've firsthand witnessed some teams who came to us and perhaps it wasn't the right fit, or they weren't quite ready with their full pitch, and they took the feedback that Wings provided and were able to not only come back and pitch to us again, but perhaps apply for other funding from other sources using some of that feedback. So the idea is that as any team pitching to Wings, you should get some benefit out of that experience, even if the benefit doesn't end up being dollars in your pocket. Now, I mentioned before, we do fund teams up to $500,000, which, depending on your level of experience in the industry, may seem like a lot of money or may not. Ultimately, to launch a title, it's not. Very few titles get to market for that price tag, depending on their scope. So the other thing that Wings does a little bit differently with our pitching interests is we do offer deals, and every deal is different. So I'm not going to sort of outline exactly what our deals look like. I know some publishers have done that, but we are different from a traditional publisher in the way that we try to create deals that complement other support that game might have. So if, for example, the game is working with a publisher and there's already some large rev share deal put in place, or there's different conditions that would make it difficult for them to recoup and also work with another funding entity, Wings has a lot of flexibility in terms of how we put our deal together. So often we can support games that may not have otherwise qualified for funding or might have had difficulty finding funding. And again, this all comes down to the idea that there are great games out there being made by likely diverse teams, which is what we're focusing on, that just never really make it to market, not because of the game or the team or even necessarily the circumstances under which it's being made, but strictly because it takes that extra investment to really bring it to people on the platform of choice. So that's really where Wings steps in and has really tried to make a difference. So a few games that you may have heard of from Wings and why we decided to fund them. So aside from our criteria about the team makeup and the fact that we are trying to amplify women and gender diverse voices, we do tend to look for games that are a little bit different. And that's usually because those games are, they have a greater chance of market viability, and also maybe they're somehow reflective of the diversity on the team itself. Great example, Bloom Digital, which is a team that we worked out of. They're from Canada. We supported them in their sort of relaunch, sort of finishing launch of Later Daters, and they've done DLC since. But Later Daters is like a dating sim / narrative experience that focuses on elderly people, which is extremely rare in games. It's sort of a senior's home where you can go and interact. And clearly that's not a story that's often told. It creates a lot of opportunity to look at different lifestyles and different types of people, especially late in life. So the game itself is very interesting, but the pitch itself is really what piqued us. So they had, obviously a dominant female team. Miriam is the leader, and she's quite well known, at least in the Canadian games industry, and I think now beyond. And the way that they approached the game was such that they had the ability to represent different genders and women as well in the game itself. Now that's the nature of the game. There's lots of characters. It happens to be a narrative where there's going to be sort of lots of different stories being told. Again, that's not a mandatory criteria of what Wings does, but it is very nice to see. So Later Daters is a great example. Another and newer game that we're supporting is called Button City. And you may have seen this game, if only because the visuals are extremely impactful and bright, but the team does a really great job online as well. And again, sort of a diverse team that's creating one of those games that has commercial appeal. They've actually done very well, and they have a huge community level of support already, much support before Wings came along. So that was part of what attracted us to them. But also, again, this idea that it's a non-violent game. It's sort of like a game filled with little mini games, so it can explore lots of different gameplay ideas and experiences within that. And the overlying theme of the game has this sort of I like to call it tough fluff. It's sort of a very cutesy game with some very tough problems that you're being asked to solve, or tough life situations that the characters are being confronted with, losing businesses and stores closing and things like that. So again, we try to look for games that are not necessarily your average bear. And we do find that diverse voices in the industry tend to come with more of those stories to us. There's a lot of different types of games that I think the industry is ready to look to now, and funding and investment teams just need to open up their minds a little bit to make sure that they're willing to take a risk on some of those games, because some of them have panned out very, very well, especially in recent years. The other thing I think is worth mentioning today is something that Wings tried to create as a result of the extra funding that we received for the GDC Relief Fund. So aside from actually pitching to us and getting funding from Wings that way, where we invest in your game, we also try to provide a lot of support to our teams. And this is also different maybe from the traditional publisher relationship. I think there's a lot of resources available to teams when they do sign a contract where they're going to be given money. There's no question that publishers have lots of resources they can provide, and it's certainly helpful when you're on a small team, regardless of how well established the team is. It is helpful to have specialists involved. But with Wings, we really try to make sure that the control and the direction of growth that the studio is taking and how they're going to use that game to position their studio really remains within their control. So we're not necessarily coming in like a maybe more traditional publisher and taking over or running the marketing or go-to-market plan. We are really there to provide funding, and often it's milestone-based funding, so that there's some kind of review process also that the team benefits from. And beyond that, we are there to solve any problems they may have. So again, it's very much It's very much like a support or a workshop group that you've joined when you join Wings. And I think that follows a little bit along the same lines as our Elevate program, which is an incubator where, devs are able to join and sort of develop an idea, and they get paid in stipends along the way as they pass different milestones. So very similarly, if a team is working with Wings, as they're bringing their game to market, they'll have the opportunity to sit with us and, ask us any questions and allow us to help them, troubleshoot if they're having challenges. But I think the most valuable thing that we offer besides the money itself are the connections to, for example, platform reps or events like Indieway, access to exhibition opportunities, or even sometimes, press events where the games themselves might have difficulty getting in or applying or paying for that space. But because of Wings and our connections and the fact that we work in the industry on many, many different teams individually, aside from Wings, we're able to bring a lot more of those opportunities to our teams. And it's without asking, I think, for some of the control that publishers typically would ask you to give up in exchange. So we are a little bit different in that way. We also have relationships with many publishers. So in the same way, if a team is unable to connect with, Nintendo or Sony, or, they don't know how to get a GDC rep to exhibit their game there, if they're looking for other funding sources or they have other needs in order to bring their game to market, we may be able to provide some of those solutions. The ones that Wings doesn't provide directly, we may be able to connect the teams to those as well. So I've mentioned a program called Elevate a couple times, and I do want to touch on this because it's returning this year, and we're all kind of internally very excited about it. It's still very secretive, but very shortly we'll be able to announce sort of our plans. We work with a group called Code Coven. And if you're not familiar, they're just a wonderful group of sort of specialists, mentors. They put on a lot of development workshops for devs who are trying to hone their skills or sort of establish themselves in a certain project or a market path. Sort of pre-pitch, I like to say. They have a lot of great pre-pitch workshops to get you polished and ready before you go. And they work with all kinds of different corporate sponsorships in the industry, many of whom have also been involved with Wings and the GDC Relief Fund. So we're big fans of Code Coven. And we're going to be putting on another program called Elevate with them. It'll be the second installment. We did the first one last year. So Elevate is basically a boot camp. And I feel like devs have seen this model before. There's a lot of boot camps out there where it's almost like a mini game jam scenario where you sign up for a few weeks and you're kind of going to walk through the basics. It definitely has all of that and more, because what it really asks devs to do is to formulate a project and to come with basically something that can be measured and rewarded along the way. And so the development program that Elevate offers actually has stipends for the developers involved. So they're getting paid to participate and paid to put in the time. And along the way, they're refining their ideas, perhaps developing, whether it's a game that they're ready to bring to market, which might be a little bit more advanced, or they may be developing the fundamentals required to go pitch that game and get some funding for it. But Elevate was a really wonderful program last year. Several of the teams have gone on to sort of take their game to the next stage, which is, out of that incubator mode and into maybe more of a production workshop where they're actually creating the game and making assets and testing and sort of doing the next stage. So it is a very good entry point for developers. And this year, the reason that we're going to put it on again is that we saw so many teams have success as a result of Elevate last year, and without sort of outing any of them, many of them are going to be coming to market soon. But one example is Button City. They actually came back to Wings and were able to apply for funding successfully there. This year, we'd like to bring Elevate back and really focus, much like Wings does, on women and gender diverse teams exclusively. So last year we had really a bunch of teams apply. Many of them had been affected by COVID-19 or the GDC cancellation as well. So the criteria that we used for who to accept was really people kind of in need, who had a great project or a great team that they were looking to further. And beyond that, we just looked for equal representation. But this year, and again, trying to be true to some of our organizations' goals to change the industry and to increase that 1% of venture capital that's going to women and gender marginalized teams, we really want to make sure our funding is going exclusively to them for Elevate. Working with Code Coven, we're going to be opening up applications very soon. Again, it's like a paid opportunity to come and learn and refine your game idea and potentially take it to the next level where you can seek further investment. So it is a very valuable program, and I really do encourage anyone, regardless of the stage at which their game idea is, I would encourage them to apply. Again, those who don't qualify for Elevate will likely still have the benefit of some feedback as a result of that process. And working with Code Coven, as well as the Wings Advisory Board, we've got a whole bunch of, and again, we'll be sharing this very soon, but we do have a whole bunch of industry mentors who joined us last year and were part of different coaching sessions or speaking engagements, sort of like this one, that were exclusive to the Elevate team. Many of them are returning this year as well. So we should have a very tight program, and I look forward to buying and playing the games that come out of it. I really do feel strongly that we're seeing more and more sort of out of the box thinking from these gender diverse teams, and more of their ideas feel like they're, sort of the direction that the market is going, which is, again, your less traditional video games. They're potentially more inclusive. And I think also are created with the idea of telling stories that people are not used to hearing. A really great example of this, and although they were not part of Elevate, they are part of Wings currently. And I bring it up because we're trying very hard to get to different areas of the globe. It's really exciting to be talking to a Turkish audience today. But we have a game called Cabaret, for example. It's out of Malaysia, and the developer has really done a lot of work to try and network and reach out, and they're quite connected in the industry, but because of their geographical location, it makes it very difficult for them to promote this game. And ironically, being closed down for COVID, which is sort of where Wings was born out of, has created a lot of digital opportunities, which is very easy relative to traveling around the world. It's very easy actually to get your game included and gain some visibility that way. So Cabaret, which is like a nice example of a game that we might not have really ever seen otherwise. I don't know how much visibility it would have had in the traditional game marketplace. They've been able to work not only the uniqueness of their story and their artwork and the fact that it's sort of about a culture that not many people are familiar with, they've paired that with support from Wings and a lot of other digital placements in order to grow during this sort of bizarre shutdown period. So I do feel strongly that there's an opportunity here for games that maybe have been lost in the noise in the past, certainly would have had trouble coming to physical events in North America or major European cities. Those games have an opportunity to be heard as well because of the way that people are relying on digital, and the fact that digital can reach more people, and there are fewer boundaries and frankly less borders overall. So we would really like to try and hone in on games that are coming from different parts of the world, from people who may not have found it easy to access these events before. That would be another sort of goal that we have in terms of who we're looking to support this year. But overall, Wings, I think, is we're really trying to push the envelope a little bit when it comes to what people expect from games as well. And that's where a lot of our roster was chosen. If you look at the games that we're working with, they don't necessarily have gameplay that you're unfamiliar with, but they likely have a story or a style of art or something that will strike most audiences as different. And I think that that's really important. If we're going to represent diverse voices in the industry, pairing that with diverse stories is sort of a nice compliment, and it makes it a little bit easier to get attention for them as well. They just stand out. So that's sort of how Wings looks at games. Obviously, our application process, which you can see in full on our website, you don't actually have to apply. You can download the entire form if you'd like to see what we're looking for. It's fairly standard. Well, we do ask you to highlight all the things that I've been talking about today. So your team makeup, like how is diversity at the forefront of what you're doing? How is your game different? We do have some basics that we look for. So I think, like any funding entity, we do want our projects to be successful. We're trying to obviously help people not only get to market, but have good commercial success in the market once they join it. So you'll see standard asks like budget and comparables, market comparables, game comparables. We may ask for a marketing plan, for example. And I just want to reiterate here that we do get a lot of teams applying that don't have all of those pieces. Right at the top of our application form, it says something to the effect of, if you don't have a complete application, please apply anyways. So that is absolutely a little bit different than most. And I would encourage you, if you're not sure if you're ready, even just go ahead and apply, and then you'll at least find out. We'll tell you very quickly whether or not this is enough for what you need, or whether we might want to hear from you in a little bit more time once you've put more information together. The other thing that I think would be worth saying is that although we fund games up to $500,000, we do absolutely unique deals with every team that we work with. And I can't share those specifics, of course, but we do have a lot of flexibility in the way that we allocate our funding. Depending on which funding interest you're talking to, there may be more or less red tape involved. And we are very fortunate at Wings to be a fairly small team, very like-minded team in terms of what we're trying to do for the industry, and the change that we want to affect. And I guess the other sort of nice part of Wings is that we do have people who represent lots of different parts of the game development sort of business. So we have people who are studio directors and owners and very business development oriented. We have investor and whether they're sort of like angel investor types, or they're part of like funding bodies. They may have been involved in some kind of government programs as well. As you may have heard, Italy just announced government funding. I know Australia has it, Canada has it, hopefully Turkey soon too. If you don't, I'm not sure, but all those types of funding interests have different specialties. So we have people who represent that side of the market as well. We have marketers and people who've developed insane engagement strategies and really awesome, sales conversion paths for games once they land and hit the ground. And then of course we have people who are much more, I guess, like they do everything. People like Audrey and Petter, our co-founders, for example, they both have their own studios who are very active in launching games, but they also do a lot of, sort of speaking engagements and mentorship work. Women in Games, which is like a huge organization, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with. They work with them. We try to work with our friends at Code Coven or other colleagues to try and, basically create programs where we can support our vision for the future. So the nice thing about Wings is, although we have all this expertise, we actually don't have that much red tape when it comes to what we decide to do. So there's a lot of flexibility when teams do come to us. And, in that respect, we're trying to be mindful of the fact that, if we do want to support voices that are not typically elevated, those voices have not had support in the past, and they haven't had comparable support maybe in the past. So, we have to maybe temper some of our expectations accordingly. The best example, I think, is when you have an indie team who, clearly has a great idea, is ready to put their best foot forward in terms of production. They really understand their timelines and the needs of the project, but the pitch or the presentation itself is not perfectly polished. That's still often a team worth working with and even funding. So I would encourage, again, if you fall into that bucket, or if you know a team that falls into that bucket, Wings is still a very viable solution for you. I'm just going to look at some of the questions here because I want to make sure that I don't miss any of them. So choice of genre or platform for the games to apply. So when a game applies, we will ask for some very basic information, more so that we're thinking about the game appropriately when we assess it. So understanding the platform that the game is going to come to is often a matter of your budget and your scope. Clearly a game on all platforms has like a greater chance of commercial success, but if it costs too much to get there, it may not be feasible. So understanding the platform that you're after first and foremost, and for most people it's PC, is important. Many games come to us and do not list any other platforms because they do not have connections yet with Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo. So that's something that Wings can help with. And, if it makes sense for the commercial path of the game to be launched on multiple platforms, that's something that we would want to encourage and support you in doing. That could be where your funding goes. Many I was going to say not necessarily Wings games specifically, but many games in general in indie seek funding once they've launched and they want to port their game to some other console or platform, somewhere where it's maybe better suited. Another good question. So does Wings just fund or publish as well? We get asked this question quite a bit. So we are not publishers in the traditional sense of the word publisher by any means. Although we would be able to connect you to platforms and, for example, help you with the cert process or navigating a contract or something like that. Like we're sort of there to support and perhaps mentor the teams if they need that type of assistance. We're not a publisher in the sense of we're not communicating with the platforms on behalf of the studio. We really want the studios when they're finished with Wings. So, remembering also that they're coming to us not necessarily to fund their studio, but to fund a specific project. So once that project is done and, effectively Wings money has been used and the relationship is done, we really want the studio to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And that's not to say that a publisher can't offer you that, but many times with a publisher, they become a middleman between you and that very important connection that you need, or that representative that you're working with. And that can be a great thing if you are a small team and that's the relationship that you're looking for. But with Wings, it's a little bit different in the sense that we do try to set up the team so that they can basically execute on their own. That's both because we're a small team at Wings, so we want to help as many people as possible, which means we can only do so much. But also, again, because we do find that the teams tend to thrive afterwards as a result of that. And as much as our financial interest may only be in the project, but our philosophical interest at Wings is in the team and the team's well-being as a company and their ability. I mean, if I'm being truthful, it's their ability to go on and hire more women and gender diverse team members. That looks success to me. And I think that's something that, a lot of people, when they ask Wings, are you able to provide publishing support? Technically, the answer is yes, but are we a publisher? Technically, no. So it's a great question. Thanks for bringing that up. If there are any other questions, I know that you can pop them into the chat here. And I just want to be mindful of the time because we only have about 5 minutes left. The last thing I guess I'd like to mention is some of what we're moving on to in the future for Wings. So applications are always open. We are a little different in that way as well. It's a rolling application deadline. We always have money. So we would always like people to be applying so that we can always allocate that money. We don't really have trouble giving out money. However, I mentioned before, we've really seen an interest grow from the AAA world in supporting gender diverse teams and women in game dev. And as a result, we are seeing more investment coming our way that we can sort of redistribute. So more teams are always welcome to apply. Also thinking about teams that, may have a project that just can't find a fit anywhere else. Sometimes that's a great look for a Wings application as well. A game that has some kind of appeal. It could be that you've done a Kickstarter and it went well, but you're not sure where to go next. It could just be that you have a good social following and you're looking to leverage that somehow. But yeah, a game where you're not exactly sure how to get it to market is not necessarily a problem at Wings. Again, if your application is sort of missing some information or has some question marks that still need to be filled in, and it's still worth submitting to us, and who knows, we may be able to help you. The other thing I'll mention also, and this is open to anyone who may be listening as well, but we do have a number of corporate interests who would like to do bigger and better things with Wings. So the Elevate program, I think, is one example of that. We started small. It was sort of extra money that we had, and we just wanted to make sure it got to the right people. But as I said, the Elevate program has changed in our sort of experience of it, has changed into something a little bit bigger and maybe more purposeful. That we'd like to bring back every year. So if you know someone who'd like to get involved either as a sponsor or a mentor, we're always looking to have more support for that program. And of course, those applications will be opening up in the summer. So we'll make sure that you know where to come if your team is interested in applying. But it can be a great way to basically learn and do some very strong professional development around a project and also get paid for it at the same time, which is pretty rare. but it puts you in a much better position when you come out of that Elevate incubator. You won't be, in the red or in the negative, so to speak, financially, so that when you do apply for funding again, it seems like a more commercially viable project. The final thing I'll mention is Wings is working very hard to bring in advisory board members all the time. And although we do have our advisory board sort of selected for the current period, if you are someone who has a real passion for, just seeing, basically like underrepresented voices uplifted in the industry, whatever that sort of means to you, we'd probably like to hear from you as well, because there may be a way for us to work together or to collaborate. It's interesting. When I joined Wings, I wasn't fully aware of how many people we had sort of funneling, whether it's money or support or mentorship into our programs. But it's really become an industry-wide initiative. So as much as Wings is a small team, we really do have a lot of sort of friends of Wings who are like-minded. And if you'd like to join us and you're interested in supporting these kinds of initiatives, we have lots of ways for you to get involved. So feel free to reach out. You can always reach me. My email is corina@wingsfund.me. I'm very easy to find. You can find us on Twitter also @wingsfund and @wingsfundme, sorry. And other than that, you can check out our website to see our current roster of games. A couple that I would recommend right off the bat, Don't Forget Me by the Moon Pirates, which is already out. I believe it's even on sale this weekend. Cabaret, the one from Malaysia that I mentioned, has a demo that you can try. It's very unique. I really like the music, especially. Fermi Paradox, which is about sort of exploring space and basically a strategy game that involves controlling other cultures. It's like massive interplanetary multicultural landscape. And then the final one that is certainly coming up and worth checking out or wish listing as well is Lord Winklebottom Investigates. And it's a very whimsical detective story that stars a giraffe. As I mentioned, we like to look at games that are a little bit different. Games that are already out, later daters, Button City is also coming. There's Pushy Pilly, and I think that's it. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. But we've got a lot of great games. So you can go to wingsfund.me to check those out. And if there's no further questions, I'll just say thank you so much for having me, Indieway. This was a really great opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining. I was just checking the games you mentioned from the Wings website while you were talking. I think the Fermi Paradox I already wishlisted. I think
nice.
It looks amazing. I think what you do is just amazing, and I hope you will support these gamers, these developers all the time. It's amazing what you do. Thank you for joining, and thank you for sharing this with us, with Indieway audience.
Thank you so much, everyone. And sorry for the audio, but we got through it.
Yep, no problem, don't worry.